I'm Linda Hirsch.
I'm Jim Carney, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
The Common Core, a new set of standards for pre-K through 12th grade education, is meant to define the knowledge and skills that students must master to ultimately prepare them for college or the workforce. While it is lauded by some, it is also provoking opposition from both conservatives and liberals. Today, in part 2 of my conversation with Rutgers University professor Marc Aronson, we continue our analysis of the English standards and the debate surrounding the implementation of the Common Core.
Later on in the program, I'll get additional perspectives on the rollout of the Common Core, but we begin with Linda and her guest in the studio.
My guest today is Marc Aronson, Rutgers University professor, author of middle grade and young adult nonfiction, speaker and publisher. Thank you, Professor Aronson, for joining us for this second edition of the Common Core. You're an expert on it, and we really feel conversation about the Common Core is really valuable. In our last segment on the Common Core, we did talk about what the Common Core was. If you wouldn't mind sort of briefly recapping,
Sure.
What do we mean by Common Core?
Right. To be quick, we're talking about today the English language arts standards. There are also standards for math and for science. These are adopted individually by the states. The English language arts standards were created by a group which is now being carried on by a group called Student Achievement Partners. If you want to learn a little more, go to their website, which is called Achieve the Core. Mm-hmm. And it was designed to look at where young people need to be when they leave school after 12th grade. What set of skills do they need to have to function well in the modern world? Common Core does not mandate curriculum. Curriculum is set by individual states, by individual districts, even within the school building by curriculum supervisors. It is just that that content is woven with a band of ever greater challenge in skills. And in particular, one of the reasons I really like the Common Core is Common Core wants to give young people that experience of endorphins of the mind, that is thinking, using your brain ever more on challenging text, challenging ideas, comparing and contrasting ideas. One thing that Common Core emphasizes or wants to emphasize is depth over breadth. Okay. That we want young people to read less, more deeply, rather than to cover a lot to get quick answers on multiple choice tests.
In our last segment, we spent some time talking about the emphasis on informational text versus fiction, and I know you've said that really it's not to the exclusion of fiction, but there has perhaps been an underemphasis in your mind on informational text. Could you summarize again briefly what you think are some of the benefits of reading informational text?
Well, some of the benefits of reading good author-driven informational text are, one, engagement.
What would that look like, by the way? You say it's not a textbook, so what would that be?
Well, very simply, many of your listeners will know the Newbery Medal given by the ALA. Right. ALA Newbery Medal is for most distinguished writing for readers through 8th grade. No work of nonfiction has won the Newbery since 1988, which was Russell Friedman's photobiography of Lincoln. So there you have had an emphasis on fiction. ALA therefore created a second award called the Seibert, same age group, for nonfiction texts. Similarly, for YA books, there's an award called the Prince, which has once been won by nonfiction, so therefore that same group within ALA that deals with teenagers has created a second award.
Maybe we need a separate award for informational text.
Well, that we have.
we have.
We have. But the point is that those books which tend to win are written by an individual author who is looking at a subject out of his or her passion for that subject. Okay. That author is choosing words with the same care and skill and love as a fiction author, is concerned with pace so that what he or she is telling us has a beginning, middle, and end.
Since curriculum isn't mandated, how do we ensure that schools are going to be selecting these kinds of readings rather than going back to
You
a
can't
textbook.
ensure that. All you can do is say, here's what the standards are. And I will say that the people I know well at Student Achievement Partners, you know what they say the secret to Common Core success, and I pass this on to
Pass
all
on your wisdom, please.
Yes, independent reading. The child who reads a lot, whether that's manga or anime or dystopian romance or nonfiction, is going to build up the vocabulary and the thinking skill that is going to allow that child to do better in a Common Core universe. So we can't guarantee, but we can say this will help.
I do understand what you're saying, because I certainly do see many children who come into the grown-ups who come into the college setting, the community college setting or college setting, lacking a content base, and that somehow this kind of information that students need isn't necessarily given to them. On the other hand, as someone who's an English professor and who's read so much fiction, when I hear people talk about informational text helping students to establish a point of view, I think of so much fiction that is all about point of view, and that it's a little harder sometimes to get the point of view, and doesn't that make that a little bit better? Especially, by the way, you said this, the 11th and 12th grade emphasis on informational text being 70%, I think. To me, that's the one time in life when students are mature enough and ready to really tackle some of the fiction that may be eluding them when they're younger, to really get a sense of character and point of view.
They absolutely should be.
So that,
and
you
let
know,
me
is
get
a misgiving that I have. But
I understand. Let me get to one point. One of the three key shifts. The first shift is to content-rich nonfiction. The second shift has to do with finding evidence in the text, finding details and evidence in the text. The third is exposing young people to ever more complex text with its discipline-specific language, so that young people are going to take in literature that is more challenging for them. So this means that it's not just in 11th or 12th grade that you're going to get the Odyssey, that you're going to get George Eliot, that you're going to get authors like Hemingway who have actually disappeared from the high school curriculum. We're saying bring in more challenging text, can be fiction, can be nonfiction. Let me talk quickly about point of view in nonfiction. Traditionally, children's nonfiction, or children's middle grade YA, wanted to seem to not have a point of view, because again, we were trying to be reliable. What we're saying is authors should put a point of view in their own point of view.
Make it transparent.
Make it transparent. Make a case. Make your case. Global warming is human caused. Global warming is not human caused, because young people are surrounded by those arguments. And where's the place where they should be exposed to and debate? Is Obamacare a good idea or is it a bad idea? Well, in school, where they are going to be exposed to op-eds, where they're going to be exposed to a book that makes an argument. And then they can begin to develop that skill to assess for themselves that argument.
To me, this requires a shift in teaching as well. How do we prepare teachers to be effective teachers of this?
Well, I will say that New York in particular, in part because it did take a lot of race to the top money, has done quite a bit of professional development for teachers and librarians. It is a step up. It is a challenge. So I think we and others certainly are doing professional development and training. The other thing is, I would urge anyone listening to this to go to a website called Engage New York. Engage New York
We'll put that up later too.
has quite a bit of information. And there are a group called Expeditionary Learning has created some very, very interesting modules for ways to bring Common Core into your classroom. Depending on who you are as a teacher, you're either going to take this whole cloth and do it, or you're going to say, hey, those are kind of interesting. I'll map that to the books I have success with.
So this issue of assessment, as you know, became a big controversy and a brouhaha here in New York when student test scores were so low. And of course, it really created, I think, a backlash against the Common Core. Was that misguided? Is the problem not the Common Core itself, but as you're saying, the rollout of the Common Core?
Yes, I absolutely think it was a mistake to have the assessment, or at least to tie the student assessments to the assessments of professionals. I think because you create an anxiety matrix. The teachers are worried about their jobs, the administrators are worried about their jobs, the librarians are worried about their jobs. This is communicated to the students who are also facing new and difficult tests.
What would be a better way of doing that?
A 2-year moratorium students are obviously going to be assessed, but in which we wouldn't tie APPR, SLO, professional assessment to student performance, because this is different. And the other thing I would say, and this is my personal opinion from no one else, I actually think we have to split Common Core into 2 meanings. And this is what I mean. For kids who are in elementary school, even through early middle school, Common Core is going to be great, because it's going to be your experience of education. Each year is going to build on the prior year. Your skills, your educational muscles will grow year by year. So when you get to really challenging high school tests, this will be a world you've grown up in. For kids who are now in 10th grade and up, it's vertigo. Everything that you've experienced in education has suddenly been exponentially increased. And while that is a good map to what's coming to you in life later, it's a slap in the face. And I do think we need to think carefully about what are we offering to a 3rd grader and what are we offering to a 10th grader. And that's just realism about what it's like to have the rug pulled out from under you and a much bigger challenge put in your face. Now you can say, better to get that in 10th grade than in 13th grade when you're out of school and don't have support systems and don't have help. But nonetheless, I think we have to face how tough this is for kids and for all the professionals who work with them.
Jim Carney had the opportunity to get some other perspectives on the Common Core, so let's hear what they had to say.
I'm eager to hear.
PSIS 187, or the Hudson Cliff School, is located in the Washington Heights section of Manhattan. I got a front-line perspective on the Common Core from 3rd through 8th grade social studies teacher Francesca Burns.
I think that there's a creative aspect to teaching. It's an organic art, and we're forgetting that entirely. So the problem is that you have these common expectations, and that's wonderful. But if you don't let teachers get there the way they can get there best with their kids, then you're robbing them of the tools they had to do that job. And when you make everyone get there the same way, now we have a problem. Because guess what? I'm an individual just like all my students are. And if I'm a very good teacher, I should be very good at getting to know all those students and forging a path with them that is never going to be identical to any other class I ever have. And that's what's missing. We're being expected to lockstep. Everybody's marching down this road to get to that end goal. Why are we doing that? Because it doesn't work.
Well, then what do we do to compete on an international level with students around the world in math, science, and...
I think we hold teachers to those expectations, but we are more flexible in how they arrive there. You know, here are 4 complex texts on this theme. And just like kids, when you have a choice, you can make the best choice. When you have no choice, right from the get-go, everyone's sort of like, oh, we all have to do the same thing. Okay, you know. And I find that especially as a literature teacher, it's very disappointing. Because when there's, oh, we're only reading these things and that's it, that just, you know, it takes out the power you would have had to discover things with the students you have in front of you.
Teaching here in Washington Heights, in New York City, is probably different from teaching in Lexington, Kentucky, or different from teaching in Arizona. Can some Common Core or something like it address unified issues that will make you know, our students ready for the second half of the 21st century, or is it something that we have to do more on an organic level? You use the word organic.
I think it has to be a combination, because I do feel that something has to drive that rigor or it naturally dissipates. You know, I think the teachers feel that pressure of, wow, my class is 2 years behind in their reading, and we're supposed to be reading a book that's a year ahead. On your own, making that decision is very unlikely for many teachers, just because it's a rough road. To know that the kids, you're going to be able to bring it to them so that you're going to bring them along, and I think with where we've been coming from with sort of, meet the kid where they are, all the independent reading at their level, in some ways that kind of dumbed everything down, because we never said this is an amazing book and everyone in this grade should read it. And there are those, I believe, we should have choice. There are also some things that I do think are kind of valuable, and the kids get a good sense of, oh, this is exciting. Everyone else in this grade and in the country reads this book. I'm reading it too.
Would you call, for example, something like the Common Core teaching by prescription or teaching by edict?
It isn't, it's the way it's being interpreted. The core on its own is just a set of bars kids should reach. It's just the way in the United States we interpret everything is just this way, that it's all about, assessment. And I think that's the problem, because you don't assess things before they exist. You don't assess things before you learn how to do them. Well, I want to learn how to ice skate, I want to learn how to swim. Don't start testing me in it before I even got in the water. What's the point of that? Because it breaks the confidence of everyone. The joy of teaching needs to be revived, because honestly, if you're going to push that hard and get the kids that far, you need to have a fuel for that. And what is it? It's not the test scores.
Reporting from Washington Heights, I'm Jim Carney for EdCast.
There are obviously many different ways of looking at the Common Core. Going back to this teacher preparation part, I would imagine that if I were a teacher that I would have some anxiety about this. And you do mention that there should be a moratorium on testing. Now, testing, of course, you brought up one thing first, the linking the teacher evaluation to the test scores. And then there were the student test scores themselves. Of course, parents so much anxiety here in the city that suddenly their kids looked like they didn't know anything. Do you think as the Common Core gets put into place and put into practice, that's going to go away? We're not going to see that? Or
there are two factors here. One, again, the Common Core is meant to prepare for kids for life after school. There is a value.
There is life after school.
in beginning to face what that challenge is going to be. But what I would add here is, I do think that the Common Core exposes what exists in society. Common Core exposes the gaps of wealth, of digital wealth, of family resources, of knowing how to use the school system to help your child get the teacher he or she needs or the support he or she needs.
How does it expose that more?
Because the standards are so high and so challenging, the child who isn't ready for them that's going to be there. So for example, talk about New York City, in Rochester, in Common Core there's 4 is the best score, 1 is there was a 5% rate of kids who got more than a 1. So 95% of the kids fell below the 1. The other thing Common Core has exposed, as we all know, are the achievement gap breaks with children of color doing worse and the gap being increased. But it's not so much increased. To me, it's an X-ray. We are facing what our society is.
All right. Now, can Common Core close that gap, or don't we need to look at that gap in an income inequality perspective? And
every time I give a talk on Common Core, I've given them all over the country, I say, look, the biggest single factor in educational outcome is income. If we could change that, it would trump Common Core. However, I also say to whatever group of educators I'm with, our ability to redistribute income in America is 0.
We pay ourselves more if we could do that.
Right. So I think while we absolutely need to acknowledge that poverty is the single largest vector
Okay.
We also need to address what we can. But when Common Core teaches you to focus on evidence, argument, and point of view, whether that's in informational text or in fiction or whatever, I actually think we have to think carefully about how to map that with technical and vocational training. Because I think if our goal is to prepare more of our students to have a good shot in life, to have a good chance to make money, to build a family, to have a nice place to live, to have all the goodies that we want, I do think we have to look at how Common Core reading, thinking, and writing fits for kids who aren't aiming at college but need those skills.
Some people have said, the Common Core, another problem is it's one size fits all. Are you saying then that it's not one size fits all, or that it may be, but we should look for some flexibility
It is
within
not
that?
one size fits all because, for example, if you
And is
look...
it developmentally attuned? That's been another criticism, that it's not developmentally appropriate at certain levels.
I think there have been people who've made bad choices of, hey, all my kids are geniuses, they're going to read this. However, if you look at Engage New York and you look at the kinds of materials that they say support Common Core reading, you know what they have listed there among the many other things are manuals. So kids who want to learn how to gain technical skills can do Common Core reading in a manual on, I don't know, something computer design or electrical design or plumbing. Plumbing is a very well-paying career, which can't be outsourced. And so I think that it's not, Common Core is not one size fits all. It's one size fits all if you believe that Common Core is training every kid for college. No, it isn't. It's training every kid for life.
Now, why the backlash then? It seems, from your perspective, well thought out, developmentally appropriate. Why the backlash?
Well, I think there are many reasons. On the one hand, the extreme political, or the more politically left people had some concerns because there was Bill and Melinda Gates money behind this, and
The
supporting.
corporate takeover of...
There's paranoia about Pearson, and is Pearson behind this? Is this corporate takeover? Are we somehow trying to make our kids into drones? The answer to that is teaching critical thinking seems probably not a great way to make drones, so I don't think that's so. On the far right, the Tea Party decided to make this their sort of new cause after Obamacare, sort of claiming that this was a federal grab. That's not true. It's not federal. So both extremes got involved that way.
The Federals are a little bit with the supposed carrot of the race to the top money.
They're not.
I know you and I disagree, carrot or stick, but whatever. Right?
They're not completely uninvolved, but it is not a federal mandate.
Okay, it is not.
Okay, then you have parents, and parents being concerned if their kids are either really distressed by the tests or find them much more challenging than expected.
What do you say to that? That's a big issue.
Well, look, I'm a parent. I have 2 kids in public school. And what I would say, of course, that's distressing. But again, if we are looking at the reason for this, is the moment to be angry if your kid doesn't do as well as you hoped on a 5th grade test, or when your kid graduates, goes to college, and has to be remediated? And has to be remediated such that now you're going to have bigger college loans because they're going to graduate later, so they're less ready for life. And so it's not fun to be up against this level of challenge. But on the other hand, it's better to get it in the school than get it when it kicks you in the behind, when you're out of school, and again, you can't get that career track in the Army you hoped for.
I suppose that testing is a big issue altogether. I mean, there were testing issues prior to the Common Core. The whole idea of standardized testing, and are we overemphasizing that? We'll have to wait for yet another segment. We only have 1 minute left, so I just want to ask you in that 1 minute, what do you want our viewers to know and understand about the Common Core?
What I would most hope you would all do is take a look at the standards for yourself and decide for yourself whether this looks like the kind of educational approach that you believe in, that you think could be healthy for your children or the children you educate. And if you think it's so, let's work to improve the Common Core, as it should be, rather than wishing magically for something totally else.
Thank you so much for joining us to this segment on the Common Core. Marc Aronson, Rutgers University professor.
Thank you.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites.
As we've reported, the Common Core has many opponents as well as supporters. An interesting and perhaps unholy alliance is the opposition of both progressive reformers and conservative Tea Party advocates. Politico reports that the far right, funded by mega donors such as the Koch brothers, may be using popular opposition to the Common Core as a way of undercutting public education. A draft action plan by the group FreedomWorks lays out a strategy that, under the mantle of parents' rights, begins with eliminating the Common Core and then moves on to expanding school choice by offering tax credits or vouchers for tuition at private and religious schools, eliminating teacher tenure and eventually even the Department of Education.
Here's a warming story for a cold winter's day. An article in The Atlantic examines Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House books to demonstrate that unlike today, in 1882, school would not have been canceled due to snow and bad weather. Characters in her novels trudge through snow and sleet to arrive at their cold one-room schoolhouse. Yes, the books are fiction, but it seems they are accurate in describing basic facts of life over 100 years ago. School was open after a snowstorm, even if getting there was difficult. So are current policies more humane, or are we just getting soft? We will not rush to judgment.
No, but my parents told me they walked uphill barefoot, both ways, to school and back in snowstorms.
My father and Ed Koch were the only two people who went to work after a blizzard.
Okay. The Education Law Center reports that New York City class size exceeds the limits for a sound basic education. Currently, class sizes are the largest they've been in 15 years. In the 2003 Campaign for Fiscal Equity ruling, the New York Court of Appeals stated that reasonable class sizes, especially in the early grades, were correlated with student achievement. It further noted that large class sizes in New York City were a contributing factor in low student performance. Though the court ordered the state to provide funding for reduced class size has only grown. Advocates for increased funding note that city schools lack the funds required for a constitutional education.
Critics of affirmative action have long argued that admission to college should be based on grades and test scores, a merit system that ignores race and ethnicity. Yet Inside Higher Ed reports that believers in a meritocracy may not be such strong supporters if the system favors certain groups. A survey of white California adults found that they favored admission policies based solely on high school averages and standardized test scores. But when half the group was told that Asian Americans make up twice as many undergraduates in the UC system as compared to their representation in the state population, opinions changed. Respondents then ranked leadership as another important quality to be considered. Maybe, as they sing in Avenue Q, everyone's a little bit racist.
Okay. Well, that does it for this edition of EdCast. I'm going to go out now into the snow and trudge and teach my classes.
There is no snow. Until next time, class dismissed.
Thank you. See you next time.